I think every one of us would not have expected that we are still not knowing how the Brexit will go on. And when we discussed these questions for months and years, any one of us thought that a solution must have been there at a time like this, but we are not at the stage, and so anyone is discussing about what will be the next steps to go. I think there has been a very good discussion between the European Union and the United Kingdom and the government, and the European Union brought it to get an agreement. But in the end, it has to be accepted, and there is still an ongoing debate in the Parliament, as you know, with very different and difficult ideas about the question. In the end, no one knows what is the idea of the Parliament that it should be, that a solution should look like. But I hope, though there is still some days, just a very few days and just very few weeks up to the planned Brexit, that we will have an agreement up to that time. It is in the interest of the United Kingdom and of Europe. Looking at the financial sector, I'm absolutely sure that we will be able to manage all the questions related to that. But this is more or less something which is just related to our will, and we have the possibilities to do the necessary steps because it's more virtual. So it's nothing where things have to be carried and goods have to be transported and things like that. But if we look at the industrial sector, and if we look at trade, it's much more complicated to have a solution for something which could be a hard Brexit. And I think this should be not underestimated if we look at the economic development of the UK or also of the European continent, because the world is a little bit different as most of the populace think. It's already a global world, and there are supply chains that are going all over the whole world, and especially within the European Union, with no borders and all the possibilities and chances and opportunities coming from that. And no one is prepared for a situation with a border between the United Kingdom and the European Union. And if this will not work as it should be, this will have an impact on industry, on supply chains, on the cash flow and things like that. And so this is the most difficult question. The most difficult political question is the border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. And that this is not solved is really something which is not good if we look to the future. And this is because of the past. Anyone knows there were problems, there were very difficult situations, and it is a question of peace whether we will be successful or not. And so I hope that in the end this problem will be solved as well. And any one of us who is just remembering the pictures of the 70s and the years before must do something that we will have a good solution. And it is absolutely clear that the European Union was and is supporting Ireland, because we know that this is a question that has to be solved. And so I hope that this will be done in the next days. There is a solution in the agreement we already reached. And so it is, and no one had a proposal how we could manage it different as it is in the already reached agreement. I think regardless of the outcome of the Brexit, Germany and the United Kingdom will always be friends and partners. And this should be said in the beginning about the financial consequences and the consequences for the financial industry and the landscape in Europe. And we know very much what we got from the British, learning about parliaments and how they could work, about democracy and the rule of law and things like that. And especially we are always very impressed by British pragmatism. We were. But But as you could imagine, since this is an attitude that was successful for decades and centuries, we hope this will be the main tendency for the future as well. And hopefully this will help us out of the situation where we are today. I think no one expects that we learned from British humor. If I would be able to make jokes like a British politician, I would not be able to continue my office. One of the jokes they do 5 times a day would be the end. And if you are doing this very special British humor jokes in Germany, you need a book afterwards to explain that this is a joke. So I think 2 or 3 times in my life I did so, and it caused really severe problems, and I'm happy that I survived them. In the end, we have to find a solution, and there will be a change. I'm absolutely sure that London and the UK will be a financial place of a big importance in the world, but there will be differences to the situation we have today. And it is obvious that there will be a lot of business that moves to the European Union. And this is because this is a market. There is an economy which is working together, and this has an impact on a lot of decisions industry is doing. And you know that it is necessary to be there where this business is handled. And so there will be a different landscape we will have in the future. As you know, many of the companies we discussed with and many others discussed are now taking parts of the business to places in Europe. A huge part of them is doing this with Frankfurt and Germany, and they have reasons for doing so, and this is just economic reasons, looking at the business, at the things they have to do, and that they have to be at the place where the market is, and this is then the European Union, which is outside of the United Kingdom. And because of that, we all are preparing for a situation like this, not forcing the things, because this is not a market-driven attitude, but understanding that we have to be prepared, that we have to do the regulations, and that we have to build a good environment for those taking the decision, moving parts of the business. For Germany, it is obvious that we, as a very strong economic place, are looking for a financial industry that is able to work with the global aspects of German industry and trade, and that they are able to participate in the business with all the services they are doing. And this is part of what is going on now. We decided that we will help all the companies going to Germany to have a good solution for themselves. And as you know, there is a lot of government. We have in Germany a lot of institutions of supervision that are working very pragmatic, helping those who are establishing their offices in Germany. And there's some aspects which are important. They are doing it pragmatic, they are doing it fast, they are doing it confidentially, and they are not supporting just the local players. They are working to the global business, and this is something which is necessary. But as I already said, there will be still business in London, and so it is necessary that we cooperate and that we find solutions for the problems that are on the table. And there are some of them that have to be solved in the next time. I'm absolutely happy that the European Union and we made the necessary decisions to deal with any situation. And we are also prepared for a hard Brexit, and we are prepared to give the business the chance that they could continue with the things that are on the table, the business that are running, because otherwise we would have a really big financial problem. And so anyone is doing it not just looking what he could get for a small benefit from not helping someone, but acting in a way that we will be able to serve the business, that it can continue, though there possibly might be no agreement about the Brexit. To make a long story short, we hope that any one of us will be able to face the situation. You should understand that the German government is very pragmatic, that the authorities are, that we want to help anyone, that there will be not a problem coming from the financial institutions and the financial industry in Europe, in Germany, and in the UK. But in the end, we need a political agreement. And this is, as I started my short remarks in the beginning, is not there. So we have to work on the question, and I hope that anyone will be as pragmatic as we expected them to be. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Minister. I'm Stephanie Flanders, head of Bloomberg Economics. We have lots of people here, I know particularly on that side of the room, who are keen to ask you questions, but I get to ask you a few first. You've spoken quite a lot about Brexit. I looked at my daily Brexit bulletin, Bloomberg Brexit bulletin this morning, very good publication if you want to read it. And the headline was, Brexit, no breakthrough in sight. Do you see anything that we can't see?
No. And this makes me nervous.
I think it makes...
honest. Yeah.
Yes.
It would be very good if I would know more than you.
And I mean, one of the questions there's been, as we had so much conversation about the backstop, but one basic question is, if we had a no-deal situation, what would you do if Ireland took no action to create a border?
We have a European Union, and the European Union has a border. We discussed about the question how to work with this situation, looking at the refugee questions in the last years. But so there has to be done something, but I think it's not the time to be that concrete, discussing what will be the exact things that have to be done then, because we are still in a situation where we try to avoid it. And anyone knows that this is good for the people in Ireland and Northern Ireland, and that there are good reasons for discussing about the backstop. It's nothing which someone thought about to make it more difficult. It is a real problem. And I'm just 60, but I have remembrance about, I remember situations and pictures about all the conflicts that have been there. And so we have a common responsibility to avoid a situation with a border.
But it is inherent in the difficulty of the situation that Ireland would be obliged to build a border, to have a border if there was a no deal. And the suggestion from them is they would not be willing to do that.
I think you know about the needs coming from a border. Anyone knows, and this is why we are discussing about the question. And no one could imagine a situation where the problem is not solved. It is not an invention of politicians. It's a reality that has to be solved, and it should be avoided that the conflicts are coming again, because we haven't been successful as politicians to solve the situation. And once again, I think that the agreement that already is reached between the British government and the European Union is really a fair one, and is working with the situation and giving a solution and a view how this could be solved. And anyone could trust the agreement. It is not invented to avoid the Brexit and the new trade policy of the United Kingdom. It is just done to keep the peace.
Final question on Brexit, and then we have lots of other things more related to Germany to discuss.
It is very nice to understand that if you look at the newspapers in Germany and other European countries, you will see it is not on the front pages.
No, well, that's fair. That's fine. You know, part of the challenge here is the political challenge is avoiding the no-deal Brexit, but also avoiding the blame for a no-deal Brexit. Do you sometimes think that it would be better for the European Union to take the time pressure out and say you can have more time, so that there isn't this, because in the UK there is a sense that the European will be blamed for having forced this deadline? What if you just said, take some more time?
I think there is a vote about a decision which would say you can't leave without having an agreement. And I don't know what will be the outcome in the Parliament. You know that there has been a decision by the European Court that the United Kingdom is always invited to go away from the Brexit. And in between there's a lot of things that could be done, but in the end, someone must take a decision. And I think it would help a lot if the people trust the European Union and its perspectives a little bit more, as I think some people do. We were not happy, all the 27, about the decision of the British to leave the European Union, and I'm still sad, to be very honest. And it will be a big problem for all of us, especially for Germany. It was the case that we were always happy about having this big nation within the European Union. But in the end, we accepted. And then we have to find a solution for the situation, and this is the agreement which is on the table and which is already reached. And it could be taken without thinking that this is a trick how to get them in the European Union for all the times. This is not true. This is just a national political debate in the United Kingdom. No one understands it outside of it because no one is trying to cheat someone here. Okay.
Let's go to something that is maybe more short term, and you have more perhaps immediate influence over. There's a story reported this morning about the potential Deutsche Bank Commerzbank merger. That you particularly are very keen to push ahead with the timing and have a decision on it before the European parliamentary elections. Is that right? That you're keen to move ahead?
I couldn't imagine what the European elections should have to do with
because the European
banking sector.
There would be some compromise required on the European Commission's part to allow it to go through, and that would be easier to accomplish.
This is a speculation which I couldn't understand, and it's just, I think it's written down somewhere, and the others are reporting about what someone else wrote in his paper.
So what's the truth then?
The truth is that we are discussing the situation of the financial industry in Germany. It is the task of our government, and as you noticed, I'm working very hard with the industry. I'm very pragmatic in this respect, and trying to understand what are the needs. If we are discussing about the clearing, if we discuss about the question of the development of the banking sector, and we are debating with the different banks about their situation for being able to do the necessary things when something is to be done. But today it is not a situation where it's necessary to report anything.
Okay. So the idea that you might be interested in the creation of a bad bank as part of that merger, is that something you would consider?
No.
You wouldn't consider it?
I think there is no debate about a bad bank, and I don't understand why someone is speculating about questions like this. There are two banks, they are doing their businesses, they are doing anything to get enough profits and things like that. And we are discussing with them and with others about the situation of the banking industry in Germany, and this is our task to do that. Nothing more is to be discussed now. And to be very honest, one aspect of all is that we understand that Germany, as possibly the most global economy we have in Europe and possibly in the world, with a lot of trade and export and imports and supply chains which have parts in all parts of the world, I think it is necessary to understand that we are very happy to have a lot of international banks acting in Germany and other parts of the financial sector, because this is one aspect of being that global, but also to have a stable banking sector of Germany that is able to go with any company abroad and to any place where they want to do things like that. And both together develops a marketplace which is able to serve the economy.
Is it important to you to have a national champion in the banking sector?
It is important to have a strong banking sector that is able to do what national champions are able to do.
But it doesn't have to be, if Deutsche Bank wanted to merge with a non-German, a European bank, but not a German bank, would that be suboptimal for you?
For us, it is absolutely important that there is both international banks acting in Germany, and we help them doing so, and we are very happy. Many international banks are supporting the German industry all over the globe, and this is necessary. And this is the same the other way around. We need institutions from Germany doing the same.
So one of the things that is concerning to investors when they look at Europe, not just Brexit, but the enormous turnover we have of political leadership in the key European jobs over the next 12 months. But obviously there's also great interest in who's going to get those jobs. I was looking and I noticed that there hasn't been a German president of the European Commission since before I was born, more than 50 years. Do you think it's Germany's turn?
We will have a European election. And my European perspective is that we do not think this is the combination of 27 nations. We will have European politics, and it would be a big step forward if the conflicts are more similar to the ones we have on the national level. So I think it is a mistake that we discuss about what should be the direction of European politics in social welfare and social cohesion questions, or in the banking sector or the border, and how to deal with migration and foreign policy and defense from the perspective of Sweden or Ireland or Cyprus or Spain or France or Germany. We should discuss this as we do things like that in our national camps. And this means that if we develop a European perspective, we think about, for instance, in my case, of a social democrat being the next president of the Commission. And this is my answer to your question.
But you may be if that is how you think of it, you may be the only country in the European Union that thinks of it that way.
This is not a funny question. It's a very serious question, and the answer is we must be like this. The others should be. And this is the way how I think about the situation of Germany in the European Union without the British. I already said that I'm absolutely sad about the UK leaving the European Union, but one of the reasons for that is that the relative size of Germany is increasing with the British leaving the European Union. And this is the latest point in history where we have to understand that we are not a party in the European debates as Germans. We should be ready for supporting the European progress. We should be ready to discuss with all the different countries and their ideas about the future of Europe, from the north, from the east, from the south. It is absolutely good that we have this good cooperation with France. But in the end, the German population, the German parliament, the German government must be ready to define a European perspective as a national one and not the other way around. And so if it would be so that the Germans are doing this in the way, it would be very good, and it is absolutely necessary for Europe and its success and the success of Europe that we do so. We hope that some others will join us with developing European strategies, European policies, and not just 27 national ones.
Well, we can always hope in the next few months that everything changes and we don't have the normal back and forth of national arguments.
Yeah, but it is a problem if a national politician is going to his TV cameras in his country and saying, I'm going to Brussels and I will fight anyone down. Then he's going there, doing compromises, absolutely polite to anyone, and then coming back to his country saying, I was the most successful part of this game. And how should a European perspective be developed out of this attitude?
We are dealing with the consequences of 50 years of that attitude here in the UK, but that's another question.
Thank you for saying so. I couldn't have done it.
But you said something interesting, and then we want to also talk about a couple of other issues and then get to questions. You said that your priority essentially is ideological and about the political leanings of these people, not necessarily the nationality. So if you are looking at the head of the European Commission, or indeed the head of the ECB president, the implication is your priority will be their mindset more than their nationality.
In the case of the president of the Commission, it is the mindset. In the case of the European Central Bank, it is one who must be absolutely professional. I think the respect of the European Central Bank comes from the persons representing it.
Do you think Jens Weidmann is always absolutely professional?
Yes. He's not the only one, but he is.
You talked about European leadership. One official I spoke to recently, he said the Franco-German relationship is running on half a cylinder. That there hasn't been it's not operating with the strength that you have seen sometimes in the past. You know, people look at Europe and they worry that no one's steering the ship. Should we be concerned?
No, I'm working very hard to get a common approach together with my friends from France. And I was quite successful. As you know, in summer last year, I got an agreement with my colleague Bruno Le Maire about how to develop the banking union. And then we were able to convince our governments, and we were able to convince the rest of all. And in December, a decision by the finance ministers and a decision by the leaders of the Eurogroup and of the European Union was taken along the line of the ideas we developed last summer. So this is a good example that it's going in the right direction. I think what is absolutely key for being successful that we don't think that this is a sort of a French-German condominium or so. It must be always with the approach I spoke about before, that all the member states of the European Union are part of the common way of finding compromises and solutions, and that we are just serving in a way of preparing proposals that could be convincing to anyone. And this is how I try to do things like that.
But on both the migration and asylum seekers issue and on some of the other reforms that you agreed with Monsieur Le Maire, the European Monetary Fund and the budget reforms, it seems that there's opposition from northern European countries. Nothing is happening.
It happened a lot. We have the decision of the leaders in the end of December. We have had the decision of the ministers of finance before. And this is the way which leads us to the necessary solutions. For instance, if we discuss about the Eurozone budget, this will be an integral part of the multi-annual framework for the budget of the European Union. And this, I think we reach an agreement in the end of this year. I hope so. I think someone are thinking about it should be done when the German presidency is starting, but this is not a good idea. We should be ready earlier. And so we are very near to a solution. It's now the debate which is part of it.
I interviewed your predecessor, Wolfgang Schäuble, many times. It was always a very interesting interview. He established a particular approach to European economic policy. I noticed that you have a new chief economist, Mr. von Weizsäcker, who may have a different attitude. If you are Italy, looking at the German finance ministry now, can you expect a difference of approach to questions of the European budget and other issues?
The more important question when we discuss about the development of Europe is that we should be able to think that we would be the other. So I always made the idea that if we learn from John Rawls when he developed the idea of a just society, he said, think that all the people sitting together about how this society should be constructed, and you do not know whether you will be the rich or the poor in this society, create a model that is fine for you in any case. And this is, I think, how we should deal with the question of getting solutions for Europe. If I discuss about European politics and financial aspects, I should be able to imagine I wake up and I'm the Minister of Finance of Italy, and all the things I said before should be right then, and the other way around, to be honest. And if we have this perspective, not being the schoolmaster of someone, I think this is a good way to get a path which is efficient and sufficient for the development of our continent.
But the rules have not been implemented necessarily fairly between countries. In fact, the Dutch Prime Minister was complaining recently that there was now a divide between the North and South in the way that the budget rules have been applied.
Now, I think that we have a debate about budget rules and that there has been a lot of progress in the past. You know, we are very strict about this question, and I'm now discussing with the ministers of my cabinet that we will have a good solution and a lot of money, but we will not go away from the idea of having a budget without new debt. And looking from this perspective, I'm discussing with all the others about their perspectives, how they could deal with their situation. In the end, anyone knows if you have too much debt, you will have a problem to defend your sovereignty. And it is an aspect of national sovereignty to be very cautious in this field. And this, I think, is an increasing knowledge in Europe.
I'm not sure I can imagine Wolfgang Schäuble even admitting that you had a lot of money in the budget to begin with, but we will see. We haven't talked about the German economy, but I'm sure there will be questions about the state of the German economy. We do have some time for questions now, so who would, yeah, right for you. So you wait for the mic.
Very practical.
Could you say very briefly who you are?
Good morning. Frits Vogels from TP ICAP. Very practical question. The Dutch Minister of Finance this week announced an exemption in the case of a hard Brexit for financial services into the Netherlands. Is this something that is considered in Germany? And to your knowledge, is this something that is coordinated on a European level?
We worked very hard to be prepared for a situation of a hard Brexit. And this is why, for instance, the European Union took the necessary decisions saying that there will be a sort of continuity even in this situation. We got an agreement about, we are working very hard to have a solution for the clearing aspects and all this. I think anyone is very pragmatic, and this is the same with the national regulations. As you know, or as you could know, we already sent a new law to the Parliament, which will be adopted, I think, in this month and adopted by the Federal Council in the beginning of the next month, so that we are prepared for this situation, that we are able to help anyone to continue with the business so that there is not a very sharp break. Yes, it will have effects, but it should not be from one day to the other, and anyone knows that. And we are just hearing to the financial industry if there are some questions that should be implemented into this law in the next week to make it more pragmatic. And we gave us all the governmental regulation rights to do it in the situations without asking Parliament once again. So there is all the things are prepared for having a not too hard Brexit in the financial sector. As I said in the beginning of my short remarks, it is more easy with the financial industry than with the producers and the traders, because they have to carry things, and this is more complicated.
Mm. Yeah.
Kevin Zhao from UBS Asset Management. My question is, it's reasonable for Germany focus on internal balance, for example, budget surplus or balance. But the problem is, the internal balance create a huge external imbalance for Germany, for Eurozone, and for the whole world. So do you think Germany has a responsibility to use that external imbalance, for example, to help other European countries who don't have capital?
Yeah, thank you for your question. First, I think one of the problems of the European Union is that possibly due to a lot of reluctant national debates, no one was admitting in the past how big the financial support for countries is already. And this is financed by the ones who have a budgetary ability to do so. For instance, in most of the countries of the south of Europe and most of the eastern countries of Europe, up to 80% of public infrastructure investment is financed by the European Union. If you look at the funds of cohesion and things we are doing with this, you will find that there's a lot of money that is spent already all over the European Union to have a good development in all the different countries. But now, in a situation where this has never been publicly debated, the ones are able to say there should be done something like this, and having some people applauding to them, and the others say nothing like this should ever happen, although it's already happening for decades. And so we need something which is more looking at the reality, and this is that there is a support from the richer countries for the other ones, and this is good so. And as you know, the agreement about building the government in Germany is that we are willing to spend even more as we do today. It's not limitless, but we are willing to spend more, and we know that this will be the outcome of the discussions about the budget. Looking at our budget, I think what is the main task we can do for Europe and even for us? To have the necessary strength to do something if there is a crisis. We don't have it yet. I think we won't have it in the next years. It's just a slowdown in growth, which what we see today. But I was the Minister of Labor in 2008 and 2009 in Germany before I became later the mayor of Hamburg. And we discussed very much about what to do in a situation like that. And one of the things we did, for instance, was inventing a support for companies to keep to their employees in a situation of the crisis. And I'm still very proud about having done so, because there were some billions we spent for that. But when the crisis was over, the growth in Germany started very early because all the people were on board. But when you look at the budget and the debt, you will find that there was an increase in the debt to GDP ratio up to 80%. And now we are decreasing down under 60. But this is the basis for Germany being able to act in a crisis with the strong power of our economy and with the strong financial power of a sovereign that is able to act, because he has not to ask others whether he should get some support for doing the necessary financial spending. We will be able to do so. And this is a real and true Keynesianism, to be honest, in this way. Many people are always saying they are doing politics like this, but they mean spending all the time. It is different. It is spending in a crisis and increasing the spending then. And we will be able to do things like that if a situation like this comes up again.
Just to follow up on that briefly, then, there will be countries, including Italy, who do not have that room by the time of the next recession. Realistically, they will not have that room. So will you be more understanding about the need to not have more austerity in the face of a recession than perhaps your predecessor was?
I think
the rules say you have to still continue to tighten those countries in a recession.
We have to understand this situation, and so it's a very good question. First, it will help a lot if Germany will be able to do something with its own economy, because this will have an impact on the rest of Europe. And so being able to do something in a situation like this is the key for any solution. Mm-hmm. The second is that we are discussing about, when we discuss about the development of the Eurozone, that we, for instance, think about the question, what could be done in a situation like this? Coming back to what I said before, if we have this big impact on European funding for infrastructure investment in so many countries, possibly if we just find out a way how this could be continued in a crisis, that the people do not reduce the investment in infrastructure, this will be a very pragmatic way to deal with a situation like that.
Are you talking about national infrastructure spending or the European infrastructure, the European funds?
The European funds could be continued, and if we find out a way how the national governments do not reduce the infrastructure spending, which is supported by the European Union, because we find a way how they could continue during the crisis.
Right, okay.
This, I think, could be something to be thought about.
That's interesting. Simon Jackson, just wait for the mic.
Mr. Scholz, you said that the backstop was not a way of tricking the UK into staying part of the EU forever. You'll know that many people in this country do think that that is exactly what it is. Your own finance, IFO Institute, highly regarded think tank, have recommended that the backstop requirement be dropped, and we should need to be more creative about finding a solution. So the question is, what is worse, a no-deal Brexit or no backstop?
I think this is the way of discussion which directly leads to the crisis. So if you are a good politician and not a bad one, you to solve problems and do not discuss which of the bad scenarios is the best.
We are... I was trying to think of an answer to that. Eventually, even good politicians have to talk about deadlines when they're coming, and solutions to deadlines when they're coming very close into view.
I think it is a problem if you just... you always spend your time on discussing the disaster. You should solve a good future.
Right. So here.
Sorry, my name's Alex Stiles from Goldman Sachs Asset Management, and I did want to mention another bad scenario, and that is the United States is threatening to put tariffs on auto imports, and a decision may come as soon as next week. So can I ask, what is your expectation for how this trade battle is going to play out, and how will Germany respond if the US does go ahead and raise tariffs?
I'm very much supporting the idea that the best thing we can do for growth and wealth is a rules-based free trade. And this was a success model which we learned from the UK and from the United States, and which we followed as a political line in the last decades. I think there is no reason for changing this attitude about trade. I hope that we will have a better situation so that we can get again more global trade agreements. There is a tendency just to have bilateral ones, but in the end it was a good development when the world was marching to have global agreements which are relevant to any country. I think that increasing tariffs is not a good idea, and as the world is that much interconnected as we hopefully any one of us knows in this room, you don't know what you do when you increase the taxes. If you are one of the big parts of the big exporters from the United States to China are German car factories in the United States. So if you discuss about situations, about tariffs, you always have consequences you never thought about. And so I hope that things like this could be avoided. And I'm very happy that the European Union is acting together in the questions of trade. And this, I think, is the best lesson anyone could learn in Europe in the last years, because it was very good that President Juncker and President Trump sat together and discussed the questions, and that it was not just always a national question that has to be discussed from one country with the United States to the other. And so I hope that the way we are going will help to get a not that confrontative situation. It would be good for economy.
There is a view that says that China will conclude from the last couple of years and the new anti-Chinese sentiment in American politics, that's not just Donald Trump, that they need to reorient themselves and have much closer relations with Europe. Many German companies think there's an opportunity to be gained from Donald Trump's trade wars. Do you think that's true?
I don't think that this is the question which is on the agenda. So business are doing businesses and they use opportunities, but in the end, it will be a worse world when there is an increase of tariffs and no one will profit from this.
Just so everyone knows, we're just going to go for a couple more questions because we started late, but we're not going to go on forever if people are wondering if they're going to get away. Let's take a couple of questions, Eric, and then I'll take one from here. Yeah.
I'm Eric Nielsen from UniCredit. Can I come back to the question of a balanced budget and the investment? It seems to me that, like for businesses, also for government, it's not necessarily a bad thing to borrow money at low interest rates for investment. And one area where Germany lacks compared to the rest of Europe is digitalization in the public sector. Your predecessor has said that something that I interpreted to mean that maybe he hadn't invested enough. Would you share that view? And do you worry about the level of digitalization where Germany is below the EU average in the public sector?
Below the US as well, I think.
First, we are investing a lot of money. If you look at the national budget, it has the highest portion of public investment as ever. And we will keep this high spending into investment in Germany. And today we have more problems to bring the things out than to finance them. So it is not a lack of money, it's a lack of doing it. So this is what we are working on. And even on the question of digital infrastructure in Germany, we are investing a lot of money and we are willing to do more. We took a lot of decisions to have a very strong investment into all the areas that are related with that. And we should be sure that we are willing to be at the top, always.
There was a question right here, yeah.
Hi, Jasper Cox from Global Capital. We had the news the other day about NordLB, the rescue plan for NordLB, the German regional bank, involving recapitalization by the Association of German Savings Banks, which have close ties to the state. And there are questions about whether this constitutes state aid. I was wondering whether you thought there was a risk that it goes against the whole banking reform since the crisis of avoiding public sector bailouts of banks.
No, I do not agree with the idea that this is state aid. If a sector of saving banks, which exists by citizens' activities for, I think, more than 100 years, is helping itself. And this is what is going on. So it's not state aid, which is the real question about this situation. And the more important question, would they do it, which was the question about the system of assistance within the saving banks, and it worked, so this is the good message from that. The second is, I believe that that this it is not against the regulations which is saying state aid. As you know, we have now 4 banks which are still in the ownership of the states, and they are an owner as a private owner, more or less. And this should be understood when discussing situations like that.
Okay, I think we are now out of time. But Minister, I want to say thank you very much for coming and speaking in such a direct and frank way. And as Con said, we haven't had your like very often here in the UK recently. I also think what you were saying about the humour, I think actually you've discovered the secret for German politicians to make a British audience laugh. You just have to talk about Britain as a role model for pragmatic decision making. Thank you very much.